Hey guys, Jacob here. As you guys know, I did make a video on the state of the game and also made one on just some of the stuff that the devs talked about, so you guys can listen. I didn't get into full review on it due to the fact that it was a pretty long video, but I've shortened this as most as I can to give you guys my opinion and also discuss some of the things that they did show in state of the game. Also, a reminder, this is not for TU7, this is for the update after, so TU7 is going to be episode 3. And that's pretty much going to be based on the story only, and nothing will really be changed. Obviously, there'll be a new gun and new missions and stuff like that. It's going to be the real change. Brand set wise and stat wise and stuff, nothing is going to be changed just yet, because it's going to be a little bit later on, which I'm guessing that's going to be towards year 2, and that's when they're going to be releasing the new content and giving us a complete revamp. Which will allow players to rework their gear, and also there'll be a new power cap, so we'll have to farm to get a little bit higher gear. The first thing I'm going to talk about is going to be the new gear game, and that's going to be the first topic that they were talking about in State of the Game, which is going to be an overview on most of it, which is the problems. Too rare to get usable things, hard to understand, have to keep too many things, no satisfaction in god rolls, and too many hybrid builds, not enough rolls. This is a lot of problems I hear from a lot of people. People are having trouble getting to some of the exotics, some of the items they really want. Some people don't understand the builds properly, and people have to hoard so much stuff. I mean, I have tons of stuff in my stash that I don't know what to do, know what to keep. It might have a slight difference, but it's nice to see that they will be changing a little bit of stuff. That way you don't have to keep everything. And too many hybrid builds, not enough rolls. Tons of people make hybrid builds, and so they can have pretty much everything they want, from high DPS to people with 11 reds with Berserk, and people who have the 600,000 armor with tons of skill power and are hitting like trucks, but also cannot be killed due to the fact their heals are really really strong, and also their seeker mines can pretty much just one-shot you, and if that doesn't kill you, they're probably going to shoot you with their rifle from a good distance away and just murk you instantly. Now the next thing is going to be talking about some of the new talents. As you guys are aware, there are going to be new talents in the game. They've also changed how talents work a little bit. Here's a few right here. You guys will see this is from Gila, Sokolov Concerns, and Murakami. You guys will see that these have been changed. Sokolov is the one that stood out the most to me because it made sense. Now instead of skill power for Seeker, it's now actually crit chance, and the crit damage is a little bit higher, and appears they've implemented like critical and surgical into the Sokolov Concern piece. And you'll see there are core attributes as well, and the normal attributes and empty mod slots, which you can see there's one of each. It appears Murakami has been more pushed to the skill side for like repair skills and skill damage, and the has some skill talents on it, or skill attributes for skill haste and repair skills. And it appears that there's DPS on Sokolov with a skill haste, an empty mod slot, and mostly blue for defensive on Gila, which is now total armor, health, and armor regen. Also, the talents: Leadership, Companion, and Empathic Resolve. Leadership is performing a cover to cover, grants 20% of your armor as a bonus armor to you and all your allies for 10 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds, which this to me is like a full-on synergy piece of gear where this can affect you and your team. Also, Companion is while you are within 5 meters of an ally or skill, total weapon damage is increased by 15%. This kind of reminds me of Spark, and I can see people just dropping skills and standing next to their teammates and just destroying people, but you have to be next to your ally or skill, so you have to be right there next to it to get this proc. And then there's Empathic Resolve. When you repair an ally, increase their total weapon damage and skill damage by 20% for 10 seconds, 5% itself. So these are really cool talents. I'm happy to see that we are going to be getting new ones, and you guys will know as well that they are changing how talents work. They're pretty much looking at every single thing in the game at the moment, including new exotics. I know some of you guys are going to be a little bit mad, saying, oh, my build's going to be destroyed. And yes, your build will be changed, because a good example this would be some people are running Murakami for the health. Well, now the health will be gone, and it's been replaced by skill duration. And if you want to get the health and total armor, you're now going to have to run 2 pieces of Gila, which actually isn't that bad because you're going to be getting total armor and health. And just from alone, you can see that the attributes on here is still a little bit of armor, and you get hazard protection and armor regen, which makes a little more sense to me on this piece of gear, due to the fact that I've always thought that Gila is pretty much a defensive brand set, and instead of a different type of brand set. That's why I didn't really like to pull skill power on there, and it appears that they've made these more towards what I think they should be, like Sokolov being a DPS brand set, which I think it's always should have been a DPS brand set, with SMG, crit damage, and the Seeker Mine. Skill power shouldn't have really been there to begin with. It really made no sense to me at all why they kept it there. I guess as they were thinking in the beginning, it was just there and they left it. But next is the no budget system. All stats can god roll. Easy to understand and satisfying to progress. So this means that you no longer have to farm for one type of thing. Like for example, people farm Alp Summit for high stat rolls, but now you will not have to farm Alp Summit. You can now just farm for one piece of gear and get a high stat roll on it. That way you're not just having to farm, oh, I have to farm this piece, then so I can roll it onto another god roll piece I'm looking for. But now all stats can be god roll. So if you're looking for like for example would be Fenris. Say you're trying to find a Fenris chest piece with a really high stat roll on it and you cannot find it because you're trying to find a really high roll. But now it appears that some of the core attributes and stuff like that have been reduced a little bit, and now you don't have to be worrying about certain talents and stuff on certain pieces. That way if you want to farm for one piece of gear, you can farm just for that one piece and get that attribute. And that is another thing, is core attributes. Now the core attributes are pretty much on different pieces of gear. So some pieces might be more unique to defensive, skill, and weapon damage. You can see here, this is a point blank protecting vest, which this is Overlord. And the core attribute is 11.5% weapon damage. So the weapon damage might be really high if it's on a certain attribute for a certain piece of gear. So if you find a piece of Gila, there's a chance that the core attribute most likely probably be really high armor. So if you guys are trying to make these new type of builds, then you should keep an eye out for certain brand sets that give the core attribute for something like damage, skill power, and defensive. If you guys are trying to find, make a skill build that hits really hard, or find strictly DPS and be a straight up, glass cannon like you were in Div 1 and just had tons of crit, which some of the attributes like DTE have been replaced. So now you can spec a little bit more crit and also a little bit more weapon damage into your build. Also, it appears that some of the brand sets now have mod slots, which some of them didn't originally, and it appears that's a thing now, so you'll be able to spec a little bit more into defensive, weapon damage, and possibly utility, to the fact some of these actually now have mod slots and will allow you to spec more into your build, due to the fact at the moment some of these have no mod slots at all, and you're pretty much, screwed because you can't really, put anything on there like, oh, I'm 100 skill power short in the skill build, but my mask does not have the slot for it, kind of like a Providence mask. And you might need 100 more, or you might need a little bit, one more red to proc something, and you just can't do it. So it's really nice to see they put that in here. But here are core attributes like I was just talking about. You can see weapon damage, the skill tier, and armor. They are determined by brand, like I said. Can be fully recalibrated, not available as attributes. So these are the core ones. So whatever you get on a piece is pretty much what you're going to get, like I said. You're most likely going to see these pieces, and some of them are going to stand out to you. So you guys are going to want to keep an eye out for different brand sets that give you different weapon damage. And they are not available as attributes, and they can be fully recalibrated. So if you guys find that chest piece with that really high weapon damage, and it has, say, really high crit chance and there's skill damage on it, you could always flip out that skill damage for something else. If you want a blue, or if you want a red, something like that, and just change it up. That way you're not stuck with just all things you don't want. But now it should be a little bit easier trying to find a max stat piece instead of just looking for 9 years. I know some guys have been looking for those really high total armor rolls, or those 15 or 16% weapon damage rolls forever, and if you didn't pick them up when they were for sale in the vendor, you may have never even seen them, which does kind of suck because they were legacy pieces which were put into the game. First of all, this is another thing too. These are some of the attributes right now you guys can take a look at. For just a quick example, it's somehow the rolls are in Division 1. And you guys will see that Gila and you can see Fenris are DPS, mostly what I have on mine. I have a feeling they're going to stick to some of these things, but Sokolov is now mostly DPS. And now Providence with skill power, which is the set bonus, which is now going to be DPS. Build defining talents, which no requirements, amplifies your stats. Build defining talents, powerful combinations, fewer active at the same time but more powerful. So now you can only have 2 talents, which does kind of suck for some of you guys if you're speccing certain talents to proc tons of damage. But you'll see composure here is now on a different piece of gear. This is now on a chest piece, so you can only get pieces on your backpack and chest. So you really have to see what brand sets and also what talents you really want to put on your build if you want to be a true tank, DPS, or have some team style talents that we could spec into certain things, because there's no talents on your gloves anymore, your knee pads, your holster. Those are now on your chest piece and backpack only, but that's pretty much what it's going to be. Next is going to be talking about putting it all together. This is just an example of a build they had on State of the Game. But you'll see Providence here's weapon damage, crit chance, and crit damage. So the branches are going to be changed, and you'll see there's a lot of attributes on some of these pieces, especially like the mask and the gloves, stuff like that. But this has 12% weapon damage, 8% weapon handling, crit chance, and crit damage, which is pretty cool. So he has 4 reds on this backpack. The thing at the bottom you guys will know is glass cannon, which I talked about, which all damage you deal is 25%, all damage you take is amplified by 50%. So if you guys have played the first game, you could probably guess what that is. It was a talent that a lot of people used with Banshee back in Div 1, and that was going to be Reckless. Due to the fact you could have tons amount of damage, but also if you got hit by a few bullets, it could just mean the death to you, and you just got ripped instantly. But it's really cool they actually added that, so if people are trying to make really, really high weapon damage builds and want to spec and be a straight glass cannon and use that in PvE or PvP, then pretty much they can just do that and rip through literally everything they want. And I'm really happy to see that they've added more talents to the game, because at the moment, there's not a large variety of talents you can really mess with. Some talents are determined on what gun you're using, and also determined on what type of build you have. Some brand sets, talents don't even work with certain guns. Like I know some people really want to use Berserk with rifles, but that's more based on shotguns, LMG, SMGs, and assault rifles, and you can no longer do that. So most people are using stuff like the Vigilance or Unstoppable Force for guns that aren't unique to those sets. And also certain brand sets give you bonuses that don't really make sense, so I'm really happy they're changing those. Another thing too is you guys will notice there's actually Obliterate on this chest piece right here. And Obliterate has been changed as well. It's not the same. They've actually changed it. So now you can actually get something like Obliterate, and you can also get Glass Cannon on your build. So if you wanted to run both these, or possibly run something like Berserk and Glass Cannon. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure what they're doing to Berserk. Also, there's no requirements apparently for these anymore. You can run whatever you want. You don't have to have a certain amount of reds. You don't have to have a certain amount of blues, which can be a bad thing and a good thing, because some people can make some really broken builds, but that's how the game's always been. Something's going to be OP and something's going to be very strong, and you kind of just have to get past it and find a way to pretty much just deal with it, and it's always been like that. And hopefully this will allow people to make a little bit different builds and also have a little bit more synergy in group play, and that way you're not just all fighting the same thing at the same time. But it's bound to happen a little bit. I'm pretty sure someone will post a meta build out there somewhere, and it'll be really strong, and people probably use it, and they'll probably nerf some of that stuff and change it, or reduce a weapon, and who knows how powerful the new exotic's going to be, which is the nickname the Chameleon, which is an exotic assault rifle that will be added in TU7, which won't even be in TU8, so they'll actually have an update to test out how powerful this weapon is. But if it's not powerful in this update, then they could buff in the next update. But if it's really powerful in this update, the new one, they could nerf for the next one. The last thing is going to be gear sets. They've been reworked. They're more fun, more powerful, 2, 3, and 4 piece bonuses, and chest and backpack and have enhanced talents. You'll see this is on hardwired, if I remember correctly. There's 10% skill haste. You get repair skills and skill damage and feedback loop, which feedback loop is whenever you use or cancel a skill, your other skills automatically refreshed and increases total skill damage and repair by 10% for 20 seconds. This can occur once per 20 seconds. And you can see the talent right there on the left side. It says feedback loop circuit, increases skill bonus of feedback loop plus 10% for 50%, which is really cool. So it appears they've actually reworked a lot of these and actually changed them up, so that way they're more unique. Hopefully they'll be more synergized, like they're talking about for group play. And in me, Division 1 was all about group play, because you base your build on what your team was using. You didn't all run strictly just DPS. I mean, you could, but it made more sense to me if you had a heal in your team. That way, if the other team was running DPS, they'd have a slight advantage. Or if you ran like Final Measure or Fire Crest, you could pin enemies in a certain area or catch grenades and get a buff for your team while running Reclaimer and have a really strong pulse, and it would all kind of fit together with the builds you're running. So if you had DPS mixed with those, you could just rip a team to shreds. If you guys have seen any of the old Division 1 footage, if you've been here that long, then you will know what I mean. I recommend looking at some of that footage if you guys want to see the highlights, how I thought, group synergy pretty much was while your builds were stuck together. But that's just a few things I wanted to talk about. I know this video is really long, and thank you guys all if you stuck around and watched it till the end. But that's pretty much I wanted to talk about. Some of the stuff I've already shown in a previous video, which was just them talking about it, which was everything. The last thing, which I'm going to discuss, is the main one a lot of people are mad about, and that is DTE. DTE is gone. I'm sorry, it's gone. They got rid of it. So now it appears that most NPCs and stuff like that is going to be based on just strictly damage. and not focus on just one type of attribute. So if you have damage, you should be able to melt NPCs, and also that's where the synergizing group play will come into play, and your builds and your talents will actually matter on what you have. And I also can't wait to see how this affects the next raid and the current raid, because the current raid is actually a DPS check, but we'll see later on in the future. But thank you guys all for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe more to 2 content, and I'll catch you guys all later.